presenter today, Mr. Steve Sizemore. Go ahead, Steve.
David, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I think that this hopefully will be a good course for you. We are going to spend probably the first 25 or 30 minutes laying a foundation on schedules. One of the things I've learned through the years in presenting courses about GSA schedules is that we need to lay some foundation and some background. We are going to talk about the mass consolidation and what that means to the ordering activity, but I think there may be some, we always have some people in these classes that aren't that familiar with schedules, so we always want to lay a little bit of background and a kind of a foundation. So I'm going to give an overview of the schedules program, and then we're going to talk about the consolidation, its impact on ordering and systems. I've got a few frequently asked questions. I mainly put those in for so you'd have them in writing. We're probably going to answer all of the ones that we've written here. It's just one chart. We're probably going to answer all of those as we go through the presentation. And so you'll have those for reference. And then we have some training and resources at the end that you'll be able to have those links and information there about that. Very glad to see the percentage was small, but glad to see a few DOD people on. We've done this course every month for the past 4 months, I believe it is, and we haven't had very many DOD people on. And of course, DOD is one of our, as an agency, as a department, they make up a big portion of our users on the schedule program. So I would like to get this information out to DOD more than we have, and so we're going to work on getting the information to them. We will be offering this course a couple of times in the next 2 to 3 months, I believe, maybe into October. We're going to do this a couple of times between now and October. I don't think we're going to do it every month, but keep an eye on gsa.gov/events for this particular course, and maybe ask your friends and colleagues to join in. I think it'll be useful. We're getting a lot of questions about what does the consolidation mean to the ordering activity. I'm also teaching a course on Thursday geared towards industry. So for you industry folks that are on today, I think that you'll gain some stuff. It's always good for you to understand what the ordering activity has to do and understand the regulations and the FAR procedures and so forth. So I think it's good for industry to be on. We are going to do a course on Thursday. Stephanie Shutt normally does that course, but she asked me to take it this week. She had a conflict. And so I'm going to do the industry briefing on Thursday about this. It's going to be very similar. It won't be quite as long, and it won't have quite as much ordering information and the FAR references and so forth. It'll be more about contract administration and what the contractor has to do, in terms of the consolidation. So we will do that on Thursday. Also wanted to just mention that as we go through this course, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the old program. I mean, in some ways I will, but everything I'm going to talk about is going to be applicable to the new program under mass consolidation, right? So we are on the verge of in about 10 days, we're going to take all the legacy contracts out of our systems. And so you will no longer see the old SIM structure in GSA eLibrary, for example. You will no longer see the old schedules in there, Schedule 36 and 00 Corp and the Mass IT, or Schedule 70, which is now called Mass IT. You'll no longer see Schedule 70. All of that's going to be under Mass as we move forward. Starting on 1 August, we are going to pull all of the old legacy information out of our systems. So everything we talk about today will be applicable going forward into the new program. Final thing I'll mention, then we'll jump into the slides, is this. I think we're scheduled for an hour and a half. I'll tell you, this one's been taking close to 2 hours, so we'll go as quickly as we can, but we want to be thorough. And so I've been taking probably close to an hour and a half, or sometimes right at an hour and a half, to do these slides, to get through all of these, and then We will take questions at the end, and so somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours. It depends on the amount of questions that we get as to how long we stay on. So that's kind of where we're headed here for the next couple hours. Just wanted to let you know that up front. So laying the foundation, multiple award schedules overview. What is a multiple award schedule? Well, it's a government-wide contract vehicle. Now, don't get that confused with a GWAC, right? It's not a GWAC. GWACs have specific statutory authority, and they are only for IT. And GSA has some GWACs called Alliant and STARS and VETS. And OASIS is not a GWAC, by the way. It's a MAC, or a multi-agency contract. CIO, SP3 is another GWAC, and then NASA SUIT. So those are the GWACs, the three from GSA, right? The Alliant, the VETS, the STARS, and then NASA's got SUIT, and National Institutes of Health has CIO SP3. Those are the 5 GWACs. So schedule's technically not a GWAC, but it is a government-wide contract vehicle, right? It's available for government-wide use. And it's for commercial products, services. And we like to say solutions at GSA because we want to be a solutions provider to your acquisition requirements. So in the FAR, the schedule, multiple award schedule, is called a federal supply schedule. So it's known as a federal supply schedule in the FAR. We call it the GSA schedule. We call it MAS. So going forward, we're referring to the program as MAS. So you've got MAS IT, for example. That would be the old Schedule 70. It's now going to be called MAS IT. MAS Professional Services is going to be the old PSS schedule, and so forth. We have MAS Facilities for the old 03 FAC schedule. So contractors can come in at any time and offer make an offer for this contract, for a scheduled contract, to the government through a standing solicitation, which is posted on beta.sam.gov, formerly FedBizOps, right, but now it's beta.sam.gov. That's where you will find the solicitation for the GSA multiple award schedule. I've linked to it there. Those are hyperlinks. So you get the presentation, which you can download at the end if you haven't already, and you'll be able to link to the solicitation if you'd like to see that. Now, as an ordering activity, it's a great place, and I've got some charts coming up. We link to it again, and I've actually got some images from what the page looks like over at beta.sam. So we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth, but it's a great way to get the terms and conditions. That solicitation is the terms and conditions of the contract. And so that's a really nice thing for contracting officers, ordering activity contracting officers, to be able to get those terms and conditions very easily and quickly is through this process, through the solicitation that's out there. And then, of course, since it's a commercial contract vehicle, schedules are awarded in accordance with FAR Part 12 procedures. And so we award under Part 12. So some people ask, again, what is a multiple award schedule? It is a bona fide contract. Some people have a basic misunderstanding of what it is. So it is a bona fide contract with the federal government. Contractors come in with an offer to the government. There's a negotiation process, there's a qualification process, there's past performance, there's determination of responsibility, all those things that you have to do in a federal contract. You do those, we do those at GSA at the schedule level. So it is a multiple award IDIQ contract, 5-year award with 3 5-year options. And let me say, I don't have this on the chart, but GSA has statutory responsibility for the schedules program. We have delegated to the Veterans Administration the authority to do schedules for medical supplies and services. So they have 9 schedules over there. Mass consolidation does not affect the VA schedules. Mass consolidation only applies to the GSA schedules. So the VA schedules, they run theirs on 10 years. They have a 5-year base with 1 5-year option. Terms and conditions are a little bit different, things like that, but it's considered a federal supply schedule. The ordering procedures for those VA schedules come from FAR 8.4, but this consolidation does not affect the VA schedules. Just want to make sure people understand that. And so at GSA, though, the GSA multiple award schedule, 5-year award, 5-year base period with 3 5-year options. It's a fixed price EPA is the contract type. So meaning that the price is fixed at the schedule level. There's an economic price adjustment built in. That's what EPA is, economic price adjustment. And that's applied generally once per year. Contractors can raise their prices. They have to do it through a contract modification unless for services. Sometimes they'll negotiate a 5-year set of rates, and those will kick in as, on the anniversary date, and they automatically increase. Apart from that, the pricing has to be implemented through a contract modification, but the prices are fixed at the schedule level. At the order level, you're likely going to see discounts when you compete the order off the GSA pricing. So you can do firm fixed price, you can do T&M or labor hour at the order level. Fair and reasonable pricing has already been determined by GSA. So the schedules are fair and reasonable. Pricing is fair and reasonable at the schedule level. And then, of course, performance requirements are established at the order level. GSA, doesn't typically buy anything, or the stuff that we do buy is minimal, right? We use our own schedules when we need something to support our agency, but the bulk of the buying is done by the ordering activities out there, the federal users, sometimes state and local users, and other authorized users on the schedule. They establish the performance requirements at the order level. All right, so here's the basic regulatory foundation. If you get nothing else from today in this first part from the kind of the schedules overview part, I really want you to get 8.4. One of the things we talk about over and over is 8.4. It's very important to stay in 8.4 when you're placing a schedules order. There has been protests that have been sustained because of ordering activities mixing procedures. Right, Part 13, Part 15 procedures do not apply to a schedules order. So it's just very important that you're using the right procedures, that you're in 8.4 and following those procedures. So that's the ordering procedures that federal government ordering activities must follow. And as I said a moment ago, Part 12 is where GSA awards the contracts under Part 12. And then 6.102D3 defines orders placed against schedules as a competitive procedure. So we occasionally get this question, are schedules SECA compliant? Is it considered competitive? There's your reference if you have that question, or if you're a competition advocate, or supervisor, or a contracting officer if you're a specialist wants to know this information. The reference there, 6.102D3, says that when you follow the ordering procedures, and this is the reason it's important to follow 8.4 procedures, when you do that, then the order is considered competitive. It is a competitive procedure, and it is SECA compliant. And so that's just important to remember. So here are the parts of the FAR that are not applicable to schedule orders. Part 13, and it says there except that it allows for BPAs, and it does say that you can do BPAs, but you do it in accordance with 8.405-3. So BPAs are awarded in the open market. The BPA procedures come out of Part 13. Under schedules, BPA procedures come out of 8.4. So 8.405-3 for BPAs. Of course, still bidding Part 14 isn't applicable. Part 15 isn't applicable. You don't do things like competitive range determinations. You don't do source selection evaluation boards. You're going to have an evaluation team, but you're not going to have a formal SSEB. You're not going to appoint an SSA, for example, source selection authority. You just do not get into those Part 15 procedures. It's just inappropriate, and it will, it could get you in trouble from a protest standpoint. Part 19 is not applicable, even if you're doing a set-aside under schedules. You do that in accordance with 8.405-5. You do not follow Part 19 procedures at the ordering level. The exception, there's exceptions to everything, right? So the exception here is bundling. So if you're in a bundling situation where you're taking small requirements, putting them together or bundling them to where it is harmful to small business, then you have to notify the SBA of that and go through that process. So it's 19203, I think it is. So you need to take a look at that in a bundling environment. Other than that, 19 doesn't apply. Again, even in a set-aside environment, right? You can do set-asides under schedules. They're discretionary always. No such thing as a rule of 2 under schedules. No such thing as a mandatory set-aside under schedules. But when you do the set-aside, again, you don't do it in accordance with 19. You do it in accordance with 8.405-5. And then Part 36, you cannot do construction and A&E under schedules. So Part 36 doesn't apply. Now, I want to say that all of these things that I'm talking about, none of this changes as a result of mass consolidation. So this is why I want to spend a few minutes here up front laying this foundation, talking about these basics of schedule contracting. Hopefully, some of you will pick something up. You may already know this, but hopefully you'll pick something up. You may learn something new. But as a reminder, it doesn't change as a result of the mass consolidation process. So the mass consolidation, was not a FAR change. It was not any kind of FAR case. Didn't have anything to do with the ordering procedures from the FAR perspective, right? It changed all of the terms, or not all. It didn't change it. It consolidated schedules. So we'll get more into that. It fundamentally did not change the terms and conditions, but the terms and conditions, the basic contract, is what we reviewed and we reformatted and we took out redundancy and we combined sins, and we did a lot of work on that basic contract and that structure. But it fundamentally did not change, and these ordering procedures that I'm talking about here did not change. So as a result of mass consolidation, nothing changes at the order level from a procedural standpoint. I'll go over a couple things that's important that is going to be the big important stuff at the order level here in just a few minutes. What parts of the FAR are applicable? I've told you what is not applicable. I've told you to stay in 8.4, but 8.4 does make some references to some other things that you need to do. So Part 7, acquisition planning, always applicable. You always have to do good acquisition planning. You should do good acquisition planning, and it is required. I've seen some acquisition planning that wasn't so good. I used the term good there, so hopefully you're doing good acquisition planning. But Part 7 applies. Part 10, market research applies. 17.5, interagency acquisitions. Those procedures kick in at $550,000 for schedule orders. So if a schedule order exceeds $550,000, then you must do a couple things in 17.5. There was, back just over a year ago, the FAR changed. It did require a determination of best procurement approach document. That was removed from the FAR in May of 2019. So you no longer have to do that best procurement approach determination that used to be prescribed by 17.5. But there's still a couple of things in there that you need to take a look at. And then protest, word about protest here. Protests are applicable. The protest authority can be exercised. You can do it. You can do a protest against schedules for any dollar amount, right? There's a little bit of misinformation out there in the federal contracting community about protest. If you're over in 16.5, and you remember those other contracts I mentioned up front, Alliant and STARS, the GWACs, and then the MACs of the world, the multi-agency contracts such as OASIS and HCATs at GSA, and Army Chess, and Navy Seaport E, and the list goes on, right? There's literally thousands of them in the marketplace. And so those contracts, if it's not a multiple award schedule or a federal supply schedule contract, the ordering procedures come from 16.505. In a 16.505 environment, the protest threshold for civilian agency contracts, not doesn't matter who places the orders, who placed the contract, who awarded the contract. So for a civilian agency awarded contract under 16.505, which is either going to be considered a MAC, a multi-agency contract, or a GWAC, That threshold is $10 million for civilian agency contracts. So anything under $10 million can't be protested. For DoD-issued contracts, the protest threshold is $25 million. Under GSA schedules, federal supply schedules, which would include the GSA schedule and the VA schedules, there is no threshold. Everything is protestable. Every award is potentially protestable under schedules. Performance-based acquisition is the preferred method of acquisition, so procedures in 37.6 are applicable. And then Part 39, acquisition of information technology. There are some requirements in there, such as an IT acquisition plan, for example, some other requirements that may need to be looked at. So Part 39 largely grew out of the Cleaner Cohen Act, and it is, there are some requirements in there for IT. So take a look at that, and if it's applicable, then yes, it's applicable in the schedules world. There's nothing unique to schedules that would prevent that from being applicable or negate that. So what are the advantages of multiple award schedules? It saves time. Full and open competition has already been obtained as you go back to the 6.102 reference. Small business set-asides are permissible but always discretionary. Publication on beta.sam.gov is not required for orders. We see this one all the time where people are on beta.sam.gov doing solicitations at the order level. There's a couple of shall nots in schedules contracting. One is you shall not synopsize. One is you shall not compete outside the program. And what the second one means is you shall not compete outside the program means that once you make the decision to go with GSA schedules, then you need to just compete among GSA schedule holders. It's not appropriate to compete contract vehicles against each other, nor is it appropriate to, for instance, bring open market in or something like that. So you always want to stay within the schedules program. You make the decision on which contract vehicle you're going to use in the market research phase, right? So the market research phase is going to tell you to use schedules or NASA SOUP or Navy C4E or GSA Alliant or et cetera, right? You're going to make that decision in the market research phase. So then the FAR says you shall not compete outside the program once you make that decision. The other shall not is you shall not publicize. It says you shall not synopsize. So what that really is saying is there's really no need to be on FedBizOpps for solicitations. I'm sorry, beta.sam.gov. I'll be saying FedBizOpps for 3 years. So beta.sam.gov, formerly FedBizOpps, no need to synopsize the requirement and be out there with that. So what's the alternative? It's eBuy, right? GSA eBuy is the platform for solicitations for schedule orders, and really for all of our other contracts. Alliant and Oasis and those other VWACs and some BPAs are all listed in eBuy. You can do any GSA solicitation at the order level through GSA eBuy. So fair and reasonable prices, back to the chart, fair and reasonable prices have already been negotiated, and then terms and conditions are already in place. And so the terms and conditions flow from the schedule contract to the order. All the terms and conditions of the schedule contract apply to the order. This is one of the unique things about BPAs, right? So we have contract flexibilities there at the bottom. We've got BPAs and CTAs. One of the unique things about BPAs in the schedule environment is that the terms and conditions flow to the BPA. So you think about an open market BPA at a Part 13, it's an agreement. Some people say, well, it's just an agreement. It's not binding. It's not a contract. Same thing's true with a GSA schedule BPA. It is an agreement, and then you're ultimately going to issue orders against it. But you do have the force of the GSA contract behind that agreement. All of the terms and conditions from the GSA contract flow to the BPA and then ultimately to any orders issued against the BPA. The one thing I missed there in the middle of the chart was buying activity receives socioeconomic credit. So anytime you issue an order against the GSA schedule contract, the ordering activity receives the socioeconomic credit, not GSA. Finally, contractor team arrangements, CTAs, a great procedure. Both of these procedures you can get at the bottom here, BPA, CTAs. You can get more information at those links there. So contract team arrangements are a very nice approach where contractors can team together, both working off of their GSA schedule, to provide a total solution to the government. And I want to remind you again, none of this stuff, this is stuff that's been in place all along, ordering procedures and schedules. None of this changes as a result of mass consolidation. I think it's important to cover it here this morning, but also want to remind you that if you're already familiar with this and you've been placing orders and you understand how to place orders under schedules, none of this procedure is changing as a result of mass consolidation. In contrast to Part 15, you do not do the formal evaluation, no SSEB, for example. You're going to have an acquisition team, an evaluation team. You're going to have a technical team, and you're going to have the contracting officer who's normally going to just do the pricing on her own, and you're going to have that, and then the contracting officer is going to write a source selection decision document. That's going to be as lengthy as it needs to be to explain the situation. I've seen some very large procurements where some of these source selection documents become quite large because they're dealing with maybe a $300 million task order, and they need to explain a lot of things about that, right, the situation. So you've got the contracting officer doing that work, and then you've got a technical team that's doing the technical evaluation, and they're going to come together, put that together, and make a decision. So it's much less formal. It doesn't mean it's not thorough, right? It's going to be thorough. You're going to document your files. You're going to do a good evaluation. There's still, it's involved, but it's just not going to be formalized through those Part 15 SSEB procedures. And then cost analysis, schedule rates are commercial. They have a fair and reasonable determination has been determined or has been conducted at the contract level. So what you're really doing in a schedules environment is just making sure that the schedule price hasn't been exceeded, and you're going to get that price either from GSA Advantage or from a price list in GSA eLibrary. And then you're going to confirm that the schedule price hasn't been exceeded on the quote, and then look for any discounts that they may be offering. And so that's a straightforward process for pricing. And it's much, much easier than doing open market pricing. Particularly you get into services and you get some of these complex requirements. I've seen some very, very complex, very large requirements under schedules through the years. And, normally you would have a pricing team. You'd be doing cost analysis. You'd look at labor rates, definitions, and you would have to do all kinds of market research to determine fair and reasonable pricing. And you're going to look at profit and G&A. And you're going to break that labor rate down. There's a lot of work that goes into that. You don't have to do all of that in schedules. You're in a commercial environment. GSA's done fair and reasonable. You're going to, again, make sure the pricing hasn't been exceeded, and then look for discounts. Of course, no debriefing. That's a Part 15 procedure, but you may provide feedback. And in practicality, these feedback sessions are going to look a lot like a debrief. You need to be fair to all your quoters. Under a schedules, under a schedules competition, you need to offer every person the same debrief feedback session. I should say, here I am telling you not to use debrief. Don't use that term. That's a Part 15 term. Do not use that term in your documentation. But we do recommend as a best practice that you provide feedback. It's not required in a schedules environment, but it is a best practice, and I think contractors deserve to get this information. They spend a lot of time and money going after these requirements. And then, of course, competitive range determination is an open market procedure, and you, in a schedules environment, you evaluate all quotes received equally, and you don't do a competitive range determination in a schedules environment. Here's the shall nots, the reference there. I'm going to move on. I talked about it already. Shall not seek competition outside the program, shall not synopsize. There's your reference. Ordering procedures, real quickly. And again, I will say again, this does not change as a result of mass consolidation. None of this changed. So you've got 8.45-1 for products. You've got 3 basic thresholds you're dealing with, below the micro to the SAT, and then exceeding the SAT. One of the things that I want to point out, and I'm not going to go line by line here. We just don't have time for this line by line, but one of the things I want to point out above the SAT, and I have it underlined, third bullet from the bottom in the top section, shall seek a price reduction. And I have that underlined. That is a shall seek a price reduction. So when you're above the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $250,000, when you're above that threshold in a scheduled buy and you send out an RFQ, you need to ask for a price reduction. The FAR says you shall ask for a price reduction when you're above the set. And so the schedule prices are really put together on a one-each basis, and they are nationwide prices. And if you're buying services, for example, and you're in a lower cost area, if you're in the Southeast versus DC or versus West Coast, you're going to probably see a little bit lower labor rate, so you'll see a discount because it's just cheaper to do business in some areas of the country. And so you always want to seek that discount. And you can always ask for the discount, even if you're below the SAT. But the FAR says above the SAT, you shall seek a price reduction. It's very easily done. Just put a statement in your RFQ instructions that says, in accordance with 8.405-4, the government is seeking a discount off the GSA schedule price. That's all you have to do. You've met the requirements. You've documented your file. It's in your instructions to the quoter, and it says, in accordance with FAR 8.405-4, the government is seeking a discount off the GSA schedule pricing. So feel free to change that, tweak it, whatever you want to add, but it can be that simple, that basic. The other thing I'll point out on this chart is the very top, the ordering activity shall provide the RFQ. That includes a description of the supplies to be delivered to the contractor, right? So you must provide an RFQ. The difference is when you're below the SAT, it says that the ordering activities shall place the order with the contractor that can provide the product at the best value. And it says that you can survey 3 contractors. Using, for example, GSA Advantage, it doesn't say you have to submit an RFQ. It says you can get Advantage pricing, do an analysis, and make an award. The caution there is make sure your local policy doesn't require an RFQ. Some agencies have said anything above the micro purchase threshold requires an RFQ. The FAR does not require that in -1 for products. You can simply get pricing off of GSA Advantage, but as long as you're under the simplified acquisition threshold, you can survey at least 3 contractors and compare the pricing and place the order. That's what that's talking about there. And then -2 is for services requiring an SOW. The difference here is when you reach the micro, and I've got another chart on services. This chart is below the micro and above the micro. And by the way, below the micro on both the services and products, really no requirements. You can just place the order if you're below $10,000. The FAR says that you should distribute orders among contractors. If you are between the micro purchase threshold and the simplified acquisition threshold, and services, the RFQ kicks in at $10,000. Remember, back on products here, the RFQ kicks in at $250,000 at the SAT. If you look at the first bullet in the center section for the micro to the SAT threshold, ordering activities shall place the order, and then the second bullet says survey at least 3 contractors, right? So you can go to GSA Advantage for products and just get pricing as long as you're under the SAT, and then place that order. Below this, for services, when you reach the micro, then you must develop a statement of work and provide the RFQ to at least 3 scheduled contractors. And you can look at this further, some of these requirements in here, such as specifying the type of order, whether it's firm fixed price or labor hour, et cetera. And then here is services above the above the simplified acquisition threshold. Services above the simplified acquisition threshold says you must compete. Orders shall be placed on a competitive basis unless you do a limited sources justification, which equates to a sole source J&A in an open market environment, if you're familiar with that. And it also says that you shall provide the RFQ in the second bullet. That includes a statement of work and the evaluation criteria. Excuse me, pardon me 1 second. All right. You shall provide the RFQ with the statement of work and evaluation criteria. So occasionally I get a question on evaluation criteria. It's really up to you, the ordering activity, right? You establish your own evaluation criteria. And then the FAR says the third bullet, provide the RFQ to as many scheduled contractors as practicable to reasonably ensure quotes from at least 3 contractors. And you can you can do that. You can provide that RFQ through email or some other means. But you can also do it through eBuy. If you've put the solicitation on eBuy, you've met the requirement for fair opportunity, and there's nowhere else to go. You can put a solicitation on eBuy, and if you only get one quote back, you can still proceed with the award because there's no other place to go. You've gone to all the available contractors on eBuy. Remember, you can't compete outside the Schedules program when you're buying on Schedules. So you can't go then and start looking at open market and bringing those into the mix. So you can do that through GSA eBuy. That's going to be your preferred method. It's not mandatory, but it is certainly a preferred method, and it keeps everything consistent. It stores everything for 7 years that you'll have available. Contractors are all getting the same information at the same time, and you can communicate back and forth through that by posting questions. They have to be posted in the form of a document. There's no Q&A function in the platform itself, but you can certainly post Q&A in the form of an attachment in the system. So it's a really nice system. Take a look at it if you're not familiar. And then this is a BPA, and for the sake of time, I'm going to move on quickly. This is for BPAs, ordering procedures for establishing BPAs for supplies, ordering procedures for establishing BPAs for services. They're very similar to for the procedures that you use to establish an order, very similar procedures in establishing a BPA. And then here's ordering procedures for BPA. So obviously if it's a single award BPA, you can just place the orders with whoever the contractor is that you have awarded to, right? But if it's a multiple award BPA, which is the preferred, FAR stated preference for multiple award, you then have to compete each of those orders. So that's your takeaway for BPA ordering, is that fair opportunity comes into play. You have to compete the orders once you hit the micro purchase threshold, $10,000. So if you have a BPA in place, multiple award BPA, and you have orders over $10,000, you must provide fair opportunity to all those BPA holders. And then here's some additional procedures for hourly rate services under BPAs. So again, moving on pretty quickly on these slides. If you have questions, reach back to us, masspmo@gsa.gov, masspmo@gsa.gov, and we will certainly get answers to your questions and help you out with any of these ordering procedure questions. All right, and then small business, and listen, I promise we're getting very close here to the mass consolidation. I know you came from mass consolidation. The basics are important, though, and it's important to say that none of this stuff has changed as a result of mass consolidation. So small business, always discretionary under schedules. You can do set-asides under schedules, but again, always discretionary. FAR Part 19 procedures do not apply. 19 procedures do not apply. When you're doing a set-aside under schedules, you must follow the ordering procedures. So that's the reason there's no rule of 2, for example, because the ordering procedures say that you need to get 3 quotes. So what you're doing in a small business set-aside under schedules, you're simply restricting competition to the socioeconomic category for whether it's going to be small or woman-owned or veteran-owned or whatever the case may be. You're restricting competition to that socioeconomic category, but then you follow the ordering procedures for schedules. So 8.405-1 for products, -2 for services, -3 for BPAs. And those ordering procedures say you need to get at least 3 quotes. That's why we do not have a rule of 2 under schedules. And the other reason is because it's discretionary. It's not mandatory. LSJs, you can do limited sources under schedules. You can do sole source or brand name. There's some posting requirements at the bottom here. Brand name must go in beginning at $25,000 into eBuy. It's a pre-award posting. And then sole source is a post-award posting on beta.sam.gov. And so, again, if you have questions on this stuff, you want to go deeper, I could talk about these topics. I think I could probably go for 8 hours on schedules and talk about all of this stuff. And we do have an 8-hour course on this that we sometimes offer. So you can go a lot deeper on a lot of this stuff. But for the sake of time, I wanted to hit these things. I think they're important, and I wanted to cover those basics. So thank you for hanging in there with me while we cover the basics. Now we're going to jump into the mass consolidation overview and what that means. All right, Bluff, bottom line up front. I spent a lot of time working with our military and was in the military myself. We use the term Bluff, bottom line up front. So what is the Bluff on mass consolidation for the ordering activity? No major impact on buyers throughout the consolidation process. And we've been in this consolidation process for over 2 years, and it really has been in a state for the last 9 months where it's kind of been public, and we've released the solicitation, and we've been transferring contracts. And so during all this process, and we're almost to the end of that, that's considered phase 2, and I'm going to cover that in a moment a little bit more, but we're getting ready to hit phase 3. Phase 3 is where we're going to remove all of the legacy contracts out of our systems, and you'll no longer be able to see those. But during all of this process, no major impact on buyers, right? No impact to existing orders. So if you have an order in place, you do not have to worry about it. It's fine. It continues as is. The contract number does not change. So the contract number for the contractor does not change. Very important. Period of performance does not change. So again, this is why that you're having no major impact at the order level, because these things do not change. Companies with more than one schedule contract will be consolidated to one contract beginning August 2020. That's what we're calling phase 3. So we're just 10 days away from August at this point. And so we are going to move into this phase 3, which is where we're taking those contractors that have multiple GSA schedules. You may have had a Schedule 70 for IT and a professional services schedule, for example, and maybe even an 03 FAC for facilities. And now they're going to have one contract instead of 3. And so we're going to move into that phase here in August, where we're starting to consolidate down to one contract. No sins have been completely canceled. And I will tell you, this is the biggest thing, and here's another takeaway for you. The biggest thing for you at the ordering activity that you're going to need to learn is this new SIN structure, and learning the SIN numbering, and learning that there is no more Schedule 70. It's now MAS, M-A-S, right? It's now MAS IT, and that our SINs are now NAICS based. And so that's going to be your biggest learning curve. All these ordering procedures that I've been talking about so far, again, haven't changed. So no big deal there. Contract numbers haven't changed. Period of performance hasn't changed. No big deal there. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is for industry, from a contract administration. A lot of things changed from a contract administration phase or standpoint, rather. And they have a lot more change to deal with than our buyers do. But the big thing to you is just learning this new SIN structure. But no SINs have been completely canceled. They were all mapped over to a new SIN. And so, and I'm going to show, I've got a link coming up to show you where the spreadsheet is, where you can see the old SINs versus the new SINs, and you can see that mapping. So you can find your old SIN and just look across and see what the new SIN is. Very easy. And then, SINs, we had 881 SINs previously across 24 schedules. We are down to 317 NAICS-based SINs now. And so, again, nothing canceled, though. We didn't take away any scope from the schedules. We didn't cancel anything. We simply made it better, consolidated, got rid of some redundancy and overlap. So it's a much better process now. This is important. This sub-bullet here, the second bullet up from the bottom. Contractor must have the SIN awarded by GSA in order to offer it to the buyer. So one of the things that we've said at GSA is that you now, under the mass consolidation, will find it easier to buy a total solution, because all of the SINs available, and by the way, SIN is special item number, just make sure you know that. SIN stands for special item number. I probably need to put that on this chart. SIN stands for special item number. It's a category description, whether your category title. And one of the things that we've said in talking about the schedules program is, and this consolidation, is that buyers can now, under this new construct, more easily acquire a total solution because we have all the SINs on one contract. The caution there is that just because the SIN is available on the contract doesn't mean the contractor can automatically sell it or that you as the buyer can buy it. It must be awarded to the contract. So that's an important message to industry. It's important to you as a buyer to understand that. So, for example, in engineering, we have the engineering, we have the professional services schedule that had engineering. And a lot of those engineering contractors had a Schedule 70 IT. Some did not, right? Many did not, actually. Some did have both an IT and an engineering contract. I've talked to many of them that said, I'd like to get a Schedule 70 so I can offer IT. It's one of those things they thought about. Some actually went out and did it. Some were still thinking about it through the years, and maybe they're going to do it at some point. Well, now they move to one contract, and you have both the engineering SINs available and the IT SINs available. But remember, the company only had an engineering schedule. So they cannot automatically start selling IT under the schedule contract simply because they have the capability. They had been thinking about getting a Schedule 70. They have the corporate capability to do it, and they've even done it in other environments outside of the schedule environment. But they just can't automatically start selling IT under this new contract. They must go to the GSA contracting officer, submit a request for a modification to add a SIN. They must add the SIN that they want to have. Now, this is a much easier process, and it's going to be easier for you, the buyer, for those companies that do have those multiple SINs, that have both engineering and IT, for example. It's going to be an easier process for you to order from a contractor in that regard and to establish that order. But they must have that SIN awarded. Just can't emphasize that enough because that's been a little bit of confusion, I think, through this whole process, is that all these companies can now just sell anything on the schedule. Technically, they can, as long as they've got it awarded, right? They have to qualify for the SIN. They have to submit pricing. If it's services, they have to go through have a labor category description and a price, and it has to be negotiated with the GSA contracting officer and so forth. So I just want to throw that caution out there. I think it's an important one. And then we have 12 large categories and 83 subcategories under the new structure of the MAS schedule. So that's, again, all that stuff we're just calling Bluff. I think those are the quick points there. The purpose of the consolidation is to reduce contract duplication and increase competition in the federal marketplace, because contractors will be better able to offer the products and services that they need to offer to the government on a single schedule. So, and I really do believe this is one of the greatest things that we've done through the schedules program. And it's been a long time coming, but now contractors can come in and get those multiple SINs, like I described a moment ago, between professional services and IT. You also have one set of terms and conditions across the schedules program, which brings more consistency to the schedules program, and the program is working more as one across GSA. We have 7 acquisition centers in GSA, and there were some little nuances. They're all great, and the schedules has always been a great program, but there were some nuances about the way they did things, or there were some nuances in the terms and conditions. There was the SCP 001 provisions in the schedules that were instructional in nature for the solicitation, and there were multiple versions of that, and we've combined all of those, and so I think we went from around 12 versions of that provision down to maybe 2, I think, now. And so so we've actually just streamlined it, right, and just made it better, made it more consistent across GSA. And for contractors to have multiple contracts, it really helps them. Helps you as a buyer too to be able to buy those total solutions that you need under this new construct, or this NAICS based. And NAICS is important, right? As a buyer, one of the first things you do is assign the NAICS code. And you go to the schedules. You went to the old schedules program, and NAICS was a bit confusing under the old program. Under the new program, the SINs are NAICS based, so you're going to immediately be able to look at the NAICS and understand what you're looking at. And I've got an example coming up. And then, of course, the last bullet, industry will have a single point of entry for the GSA schedule program. Benefits here, more benefits, more streamlined process for finding and acquiring the products, NAICS based, and then an easier process to understand. I think I've covered all of that pretty well. So what are we going to call this new schedule? This was just decided not long ago, about a month ago, maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago. We kind of settled on this. So it's going to be the mass large category and then the subcategory. For example, the schedules program, we're calling it mass now, right? The multiple word schedule. And then there's information technology, for example, is a large category. So mass IT used to be Schedule 70. So that's a good example there. Schedule 70 used to be mass IT. So then what was being offered under mass IT? Well, there was hardware. There was the hardware SIN that was being offered. So 132.8, for example, was the SIN number. So now we have mass IT hardware. So there is an IT hardware subcategory. So the subcategory is IT hardware. So now it's just mass IT hardware. And then professional services used to be the professional services schedule. We now have professional services engineering, for example, and that used to be under the professional services schedule under the SINs 871.1 through 6. And now it's just simply called mass professional services. And then we have mass facilities, and then facility services. That was the old 03 FAC schedule. And that 03 FAC was broken up into some various subcategories. But the 03 FAC was the mass facilities piece. And then specific SINs went into the subcategories. So that's how it's structured now going forward. And again, I think as a buying activity, that's going to be your biggest learning curve, is understanding this new SIN structure and this new construct of the GSA schedule. So here's just a chart of the process. It goes all the way back to the very beginning of 19, and even back into 18. I remember we had some meetings back then and started this whole process. And you can see there on the screen what we did. So wanted to create a new solicitation for the single schedule. We reviewed every term and condition across all of the 24 schedules that we had in place. So we had 24 solicitations on FedBizOps back then, now beta.sam.gov. We had 24. We're down to 1 now. So we reviewed every term and condition. We, of course, got rid of duplication in the terms and conditions area. We updated where there might need to be some updating and made sure everything was current. We mapped the duplicate special item numbers across all of the solicitations. So there was some duplication across schedules in some of these SINs. We organized the schedules around category management. So the 12 large categories are based on the 12 categories across category management that we've all heard of in the government. And then, of course, release the new schedule and then close existing schedules to new offers. So we released the new schedule solicitation back on October 1st of 2019. So any company that has come to GSA since October 1st with an offer to become a schedule holder has come in under the new terms and conditions. And then at the end of January, I believe it's January 30th or 31st, we released what we call the mass modification, mass MASS, the mass mod went out across the schedules program. It really went out over about a week because we had the 7 different acquisition schedules, 20 centers, and then 24 different schedules. So it really went out over about a week to kind of a rolling implementation of the mass mod. Went out to all of our current contractors. And we're at about a 96, 97% acceptance rate at this point. The deadline is July 31st. So if you're industry, haven't accepted that mass mod, you need to jump on that and get it done. Deadline is July 31st. And for contractors that haven't accepted that mass mod, those are the ones that's going to be taken out of our system. So any remaining contractors in the old schedules, the old legacy schedules, those schedules are going to be removed from the systems on July 31st. So beginning August 1st, it's all going to be the new schedules. And then phase 3 is, phase 2 was just moving contractors from the old to the new, current contractors, right? So solicitation went out on October 1st for new schedule holders. Then in January, the end of January, we released this mass mod and started moving current schedule holders to the new contract, new terms and conditions. And then starting in August, we're going to start the consolidation of multiple contracts into a single contract for those companies that have more than one contract. Here are the 24 schedules, 24 legacy schedules that were out there, basically all the GSA schedules. Remember, it does not affect the 9 VA schedules. It's only the GSA schedules. But these 24 GSA schedules are the entire program that was moving over. Here are the 12 large subcategories. You can see what they are. I'm not going to read the entire screen to you, but just give you this for reference. These are the 12 large categories. Notice there is a miscellaneous, kind of in the second row, second box, second row, second column, second row, miscellaneous category there. That picks up like the OLM SIN, order level materials, for example. So if you have a professional services schedule, you're going to need to also, and I'm going to show you these attachments in a moment, these category attachments, but you're going to have the base solicitation, you're going to have the category attachment for professional services, and if you want to have the OLM SIN, then you need to have the miscellaneous attachment as well. And so that's how that's going to work. And then here are the consolidated, mass consolidated categories, large categories at the top and then the subcategories underneath. There's 83 subcategories. 83 subcategories. So there's 6 on this side and then 6 on this side. So 12 large categories, 83 subcategories. And you can go back and look at these on your own here. So here's the new SIN structure. So I talked a good bit about this, and again, this is your learning curve as a buying activity, as a contracting officer, is understanding the legacy SINs in the left column, 874-503. That's now 541614 is the SIN. That's also the NAICS code, right? So you go back to the top of the chart, you've got 541614 as a NAICS. That is, the definition of that is Process, Physical Distribution, and Logistics Consulting Services. So we took that NAICS and created a SIN in our system. Rather than having 874-503, we now have 541614. And so in this example, you've also got a couple different types of logistics services here. And so we added a second SIN called 541614 SVC. So that's going to be supply and value chain management. And then the top one is deployment, distribution, and transportation logistics services. And so there's a little bit of differences in the types of services here. So this is where we took 3 SINs into 2. And that's how we got from 881 SINs down to 317 SINs, is by doing stuff like this. Like for the engineering services, there were 6 SINs under engineering, 871-1 through 6. We combined those into 2. So we took 6 into 2. And so you get rid of 4 SINs there, you get 1 SIN here. And so that's how we went from 881 to 317, was just simply by mapping these SINs to the right NAICS code. And as a buyer, when you look at this, you immediately know, hey, that's the NAICS. I mean, it was a little bit harder in the past to know the NAICS or to find the NAICS code. Now you look at the SIN title, not the title, but the numbering. You look at the SIN numbering, and you know immediately 541614 is a NAICS code. And then you know that 541614 is a NAICS code, even though it's got SBC behind it. So you will see that in some of our SINs, they do have some letters after them. That was done just to kind of differentiate and make it a little bit more discreet, right? So we still know that 541614 is the NAICS code for this particular SIN. Another example, and I go back to engineering. I talk about that a lot. I use that in examples a lot because I work with it a lot. But engineering services, 541330, we just put an E and G on the end of that. So it's 541330 ENG for engineering. That's basic general engineering services. The NAICS code is 541330. The SIN is 541330 ENG. If you're doing R&D engineering, the NAICS code is 541715, and the SIN is 541715. So most of our SINs are just going to be strictly numbers, but again, there are quite a few that have some letters after them. But understand that the numbers represent the NAICS code, and there's a couple of 4- and 5-digit number sets, and that's where that the first 4 or 5 digits were descriptive, and then there's maybe some multiple NAICS under that description. So you see that just a little bit, but we've tried to use a single NAICS for single SINs in most cases. You will see a little bit of IT services is one, right? So it's 5451S for services. So for IT services. So that S is there for services. We know the first 5 digit is the NAICS code. And then you look at the 6 digit, there's about 4 different ones in there with the 6 digit. So it's going to be just a much easier process. Again, that's going to be your learning curve. Here's what you're looking at beta.sam.gov. Wanted to share this with you as a contracting officer. You may want to just go pull this solicitation and have it for reference, right? This is the terms and conditions of the contract. The link up at the top, the go.usa.gov, works, so you can click that and go straight to the beta.sam.gov site. Go to this site. As you scroll down on this page, this is what you're going to see. And this spreadsheet right here, the first arrow to the left, available offerings Excel spreadsheet, that is the spreadsheet that has the SIN mapping in it. And so that, on the first tab, there's a dozen tabs in that spreadsheet that show, or 13, I guess, one for each category and then one roll-up. It shows all of the SIN mapping across all of the schedules. And so the first SIN, or the first tab, though, is the roll-up. And you can just go in there and they're filtered, or you can search in multiple ways, and you can find your legacy SIN. If you're looking for 871.1, for example, you can search on that, find it, and then look across the row, and you can find the new SINs, 541330 E and G. It's going to be very helpful as a buyer when you're trying to understand the SINs and how they've changed. And then regulations incorporated by reference is the next attachment here that I've marked. Get that question quite often from contracting officers. Where do I see the regulations incorporated by reference? Here it is in an attachment for you. They're also listed in each of the category attachments, but this is kind of a roll-up attachment for you. So all the regulations incorporated by reference. So the next set of attachments are the category attachments. Right, and there's some more. It flows down to the next page. Of course, if you're at the website, it's just all one continuous scroll down. But here is the base solicitation at the bottom of this listing. Is solicitation. It's 01. It's the base solicitation. To get your terms and conditions, I put it in a box here. You take the solicitation. You take the base solicitation plus the category attachment. That is the terms and conditions of the schedule when you combine those two documents. So for contractors that have multiple contracts, they're going to have multiple category attachments. So for instance, you have 03 FAC legacy schedule. You now have 03 facilities category attachment. And so you're going to have 01 solicitation, and you're going to have 03 facilities category attachment. Now let me go back up a little bit. You're also going to have 08 miscellaneous if you want to have the OLN SIN or the ancillary SIN. And most of the time we see those along with the 03 FAC schedule. So if you have an 03 FAC schedule, legacy, you're now going to be on the 01, 03, and probably the 08 document because you're going to want the OLN SIN or the ancillary SIN, and those are contained in 08. You then may be one of these companies that have multiple schedules, right? You may have had not only an 03 FAC schedule, but maybe you had an engineering schedule, professional services schedule. So you're going to have the 09 attachment for that portion of your contract. And you get the idea here. So each of these category attachments, along with the base solicitation, make up the contract. And so this is a great resource, even as a buyer. This is normally where contractors are going to go. They're going to download these solicitations, these documents. They're going to respond to the solicitation. But as a buyer, as a contracting officer, this is where you're going to get the terms and conditions of the contract. Very important. Here's just another link to the available offerings attachment. It's the same link back here in beta.sam, this chart right here, this available offerings Excel spreadsheet, first arrow on the left at the top. That spreadsheet is linked there, and I've got a couple other places it's linked. One of them is here on this site, and the website is at the very bottom. It's gsa.gov/mass category requirements. And if you're a contractor listening, this is the site you need to go to get started. If you look over on the left in that box there, in that blue box, there's a link there that says, our schedule's a good fit for me. So as a contractor, that's going to be the first place you start. And you can kind of walk through this process. So this is going to be a great resource for you. As a buyer, if you want to know more about the construct of schedules and the basic contract itself, this is a great place to go. This is also a great place to go to get that spreadsheet. And then as you scroll down on this page, there are going to be templates and attachments that go with the solicitation that contractors have to fill out and submit with their offer. So all those attachments are available on this page. So then how will mass consolidation affect ordering? Remember, some of this is a little bit repetitive, and I know there's some repetition in this, a little bit of repetition in this presentation. And sometimes repetition is good, especially for us adult learners. It's hard to stay focused sometimes, and repetition is good. So I've said this before, but contract numbers are not changing. No need to recompete or move orders. Legacy schedule contracts will remain in place until existing BPAs are canceled or expired. So this is important. We've had this question: what about my BPA? I'm an ordering activity. I have a BPA in place. And under schedules BPAs, if the schedule dies, the BPA dies, right? You cannot issue orders under a BPA if the schedule contract is not active. And so we are going to keep those BPAs in place. It's important that the contractor lets us know that they have BPAs under their existing contract so that we do not cancel that contract. So that's very important. So contractors need to do that. Buyers can help us with that information, or make sure that your contractor is passing that information back to GSA. And we're going to ask, when we move into phase 3 and we do this contract consolidation, where we're moving from 2 contracts or 3 contracts down to 1. And listen, it's technically not going to be a consolidation. It's going to be a modification of the contract that they choose to be their primary. So a contractor, say they have 2 contracts, they're going to choose one to remain as the contract under the new mass structure. And then we're just going to have to do modifications to add labor categories and SINs to that new contract. Once that's done, we're going to cancel the old contract. And so it'll likely be the same labor categories and SINs as was on the other contract that will be added to the new contract. But I'm just saying it's technically not a consolidation, even though we call it that. It is a modification process to add the SIN to the new contract, and then there will be a negotiation, and the labor categories and pricing or products or whatever will have to be added through a modification process to the schedule they're going to keep. Once all that's done, we're just going to delete the remaining contract that's no longer being used. And again, if there's a BPA against that contract, we're going to be asking the contractor if they have BPAs. We're going to leave that contract in place just for the purposes of that BPA running its course. And so we really want to try to make sure that we're protecting the buyer here, and that the government does not experience any break in service on BPAs. That last bullet, primary bullet, says buyers should post new RFQs under the new SINs and GSA or GSA eBuy. And we're getting to the point, just in 10 days, you're not going to have any choice, right? I've been saying that for months, but in 10 days, you're not going to have any choice. So on August 1st, you're only going to be able to place RFQs under the new SINs and GSA eBuy. Until August the 1st, we are picking up old SINs. So if you place something out there on the new SIN in eBuy, the system automatically pulls in the old legacy SIN. So we've addressed that in the system and making sure that contractors are not left out of the competition. So during the last 4 months, there's been this process, really almost 6 months, there's been this process of some contractors being in the old SIN and some being in the new SINs, old SINs. And as they transitioned over, we wanted to make sure that nobody was left behind. So we had eBuy pulling over contractors. So as a buyer, you didn't have to worry about it. So we were taking care of it on the back end, making sure that if you submitted an RFQ through eBuy, that it went to all contractors, both new schedule and old schedule. All right, what about OLMs, order level materials? These are supplies or services that are required in direct support of a task or delivery order. So it's really, think ODCs. Other direct costs, OLM is simply a process to buy ODCs. And OLM procedures are, again, nothing has changed, right? OLM was around before we moved to the new schedule, and nothing has changed. But just real quick on OLMs, continuing the chart, OLM prices are not established at the scheduled contract level. They are established at the order level. The ordering contracting officer, or OCO, is responsible for making a fair and reasonable price determination. They are purchased under the authority of the FSS program. They shall not be the primary purpose of the order, but an integral part of the solution. And the OLM SIN may not be used as a standalone SIN, but may only be used to support other SINs on an order. So let me summarize what an OLM is. You think about IT services, and you've got a company coming in to do IT services for you, and they need to provide some hardware. Maybe it's a security gateway, or maybe it's some laptops, or maybe it's some cabling, or whatever the case may be. They're providing some hardware to support a services task. That hardware can now be bought. I say now because this rule is only a couple of years old. And still just getting traction, I think, and just starting to be used a lot more. They can buy this material under the OLM process. In the past, it had to be bought open market. Now it can be bought under this OLM process. And so that's very simply what OLMs are. I've got a whole nother, we have got a whole nother course on that we teach. But I did want to cover OLMs in this process. Under the legacy schedules, under the legacy program, there were 12 of the 24 schedules authorized. These are the old 12 authorized schedules under the old program. That did not change under mass consolidation. So it's being done by category and subcategory at this point, right? So remember, we have 12 categories and 83 subcategories. So under the new construct, under the new multiple work schedule, single schedule, we have 59 subcategories that are eligible for OLMs. There's 83, so we've got 24 subcategories that cannot offer OLMs. These 59 categories mapped back to these 12 original schedules. Now, at some point in the future, I suspect that we'll just open up the entire single multiple schedule to OLMs. Right now, though, it's open to these categories. This is the OLM SIN. One of the things we did when we did the SINs is tweak some of the descriptions a little bit. OLM has been streamlined from a description standpoint, so I just wanted to throw it in here for reference. I'm not going to go through it. If you have OLM questions and want to know more about that, let us know. Shoot us an email. So what about systems and mass consolidation? GSA eLibrary is our really the repository, the source for all contracts awarded. VA schedules information is in our systems as well. And so eLibrary is not a buying system. Advantage is for placing orders. eBuy is for placing solicitations. eLibrary is really it's the place to look to see who's on contract. You can see all the SIN structure in there, and you can see all the contractors in there. It's a great starting point, great resource. So as new contracts are awarded, and I'm going to update this just a little bit for the next presentation, because this has been true the last 6 months. But again, we're coming to the end of phase 2. And what we're saying in the first bullets is as contracts are awarded and existing contractors accept the mass modification, you'll start seeing this term MAS populate into GSA eLibrary. So rather than seeing, schedule 70, you're going to now rather see, and it was just simply 70. It used to be a link, just 70. That was the schedule number. Now it's MAS, right? And on 1 August, 70 is actually going to disappear out of the system. So all of those legacy schedules are going to go away. And so I need to tweak this a little bit here. So what we're saying, though, is as this has been happening over the past few months, you had them both in there. So if a new contract was awarded or an existing contractor accepted the mass modification and moved to the new schedule, then they moved in the system as those actions were being done. So every day we were seeing the old categories, the old schedules, we would see the numbers decreasing, and we would see the mass numbers increasing on a daily basis throughout the last 4 months. Contractors, I've said that the schedules are no longer, not contract orders, but contracts themselves will no longer show up after 1 August. And then customers can review the new schedules and SIN structure for reference. So here is one additional place. I've given you 2. Here's a third place to find that mass available offerings crosswalk. This is the homepage of GSA eLibrary. It's right there on the right, the mass available offerings crosswalk. And so you can get to that spreadsheet I've been talking about through that link. Here is what the eLibrary is going to look like in the with the new structure. So if you look, and I didn't put an arrow here, but just above where it says category 12 total, there's 3 letters MAS, so that's the multiple word schedule. That would have said in legacy schedules, that would have said, for instance, 70, and it would have said information technology. Now it says MAS, multiple word schedule, and it's got all the subcategories and SINs underneath it. And so going back again to the legacy, it said 70, and then it would list the SINs under there. This just says mass, and it lists the SINs. By the way, the categories in alphabetical order. The first one up is facilities. So you can see the category is going to be the left-hand section there, or before the dash, right? It's one word in this case, and it's going to be facilities. And then you have facilities, maintenance, and repair. You have facilities, maintenance, and repair underlined there. That's going to be the subcategory, and there's 83 of those. And by the way, the box right above subcategory is also links over to FedBizOps. It's another way to get to FedBizOps. Or we need to change that to where it says beta.sam.gov. And then NAICS-based SINs are listed under there, right? So in this first one here, you see that it does have a letter after it, the one where the arrow is pointing. 54160E echo. So we know that 541690 is the NAICS code, and that's now the SIN. So again, this is going to be your biggest learning curve in the schedules environment. But I think it's pretty easy because it's all NAICS based. And certainly using the search box, looking for searching on terms. If you come in and you're used to going to logistics services, you want to look for logistics services, and you knew in the past that was 874-503. I'll get there in a moment. 874-503, you knew that was the SIN for logistics services, and now you're not sure what the new SIN is. Just simply search on the term logistics services. And so on this chart, I searched on the term engineering services, and I came up with this listing. So I've got professional services as my category, and I've got the subcategory is technical and engineering services, non-IT. And then I have the category listed as 541330 ENG, and then engineering services. And so it's pretty simple. In the past, that would have been listed under 00 Corp for professional services, and it would have been, there would have been, different SINs down through there. There were 6 that covered engineering, 871-1 through 6. Now we have 541330 ENG. So that's how eLibrary looks. That's the system. That's the new SIN structure. That's your learning curve. Here is a contractor detail page. I just picked a contractor at random, and I wanted one with multiple contracts, so I just picked one of the larger contractors at random. And you can see that they have mass at the top section. They have mass again times 2 at the bottom. So they actually have 3 multiple award schedule mass schedules. And this is a good example to show you that the other contracts are listed there, right? So they have Alliant 2, they have HCATs. Those are the HCATs is a multiple award contract. It's not a schedule. Alliant 2 is a GWAC. It's not a schedule. So all of our contractors in any of our contract programs are listed in GSA eLibrary. And they even have a BPA there that's listed. And so, but they have 3 schedules, right? And they have accepted the mass modification on all 3 of those and moved them over. So they now say mass. Those were legacy schedules. I don't know what the difference was. One of them may have been 70, one of them may have been engineering, 00 Corp, whatever the case was. They had 3 schedules. Now they've got mass listed in there 3 times. So now we're going to move into phase 3, and we're going to take companies like this and we're going to bring them down to 1 listing for mass. That's going to be the phase 3 process. So that's just a good example I wanted to show you. And then GSA eBuy, a great platform for posting those solicitations. Remember, you need to be here rather than FedBizOps. So it's a great platform for posting those solicitations out there. It's an RFQ system. And RFP is for, schedules. We use the term RFQ in a schedules environment, request for quote. In Alliant and Oasis and HCATs and STARS and VETS is request for proposals. RFP is fine. Schedules, we want to stick to request for quote. And then under eBuy, 25 schedules currently, 24 legacy plus the new single schedule. August 2020 going to 1 schedule. And then as of now, that eBuy will automatically populate contractors from legacy and new SINs when you choose to send out an RFQ. And then the search process is the large category, the subcategory, and the SIN. Let me illustrate. So here is a search on engineering services, and it brings up multiple word schedule there. You see the blue arrow at the top. As you scroll down, you will see that anything having to do with engineering came up. I'm looking for professional services under engineering. So as I scroll down through there, I know, and I already know that my NAICS code is 541330, but even if I don't, I know that what I'm seeing on the screen is not what I'm looking for. You can go to the left and you can jump to a source over there, so you can click directly over to a source. Some of that's going to disappear. Let's see, everything there will disappear except for the top entry on 1 August, which is mass multiple award schedule. As you scroll on down, though, you're going to see on the page that we do come to engineering services 541330 engineering. And I can continue to look here on the page. I'm not looking for system design and integration. I'm not looking for integrated logistics support. I'm looking for general engineering. 541330 is my NAICS code. The other engineering, which was legacy PSS 8711 through 6, is 541715 for R&D. So I just pointed out both of those for my engineering services. It could be R&D. It could be general engineering. But I have to understand my scope of work to know where to best put the requirement. Then I just hit select. So over to the, let me go back one, over to the left side, you see the NAICS code or the SIN number, 541330ENG, and right under it's a blue box select. I hit that box, it brings me to this page. And I've got 1,068 vendors available. And as I scroll down, I will be able to start seeing those. Over to the left, you can filter if you want to look at service disabled veteran owned. For example, you've got those there. There is 141 there, and so forth. You can see that filtering socioeconomic designation on the left. The system asks you if it's a set aside, and you can tell it yes or no, and it will apply filters automatically for you. I can then search in the red box there where I've got a red box around the middle, filter by vendor name, city, or state. I can do that, and if you click the blue headers that says vendor or city, state, that will sort in using those columns. And so just a very nice, easy to use system. So that's eBuy. That's what it looks like under the new construct. And then GSA Advantage, there's no changes in Advantage from a structural standpoint or what the view looks like. But after July 31st, items in GSA Advantage with legacy schedule and SIN numbers will be removed. And so come August 1st, you're only going to see the new contract in our systems. No impact to FPDS. Contract numbers are not changing. FPDS will remain intact with the same dates already assigned. There was no size standard recertification during this process, right? So no size standard recertification either. So very important. Size standards are going to remain the same. Under schedules, we only do a size standard recertification at option time unless there's a merger or an acquisition. The company gets bought or sold. The new company will have to recertify. But beyond that, just for normal growth, we don't recertify until option time. So the size standard is good during the base period and each option period. So the size standard is good for 5 years under GSA schedule contracts. And then here's these frequently asked questions. I think I've probably covered all of these. Let me look real quickly here. So I just mentioned, I see one that maybe I didn't talk about. It's the fourth question now. What happens if I receive a quote from a SIN category that I didn't select? Now, that may happen under this new construct, and hopefully we can be able to streamline that and improve it going forward. But right now, there's going to be some when we consolidated down from 881 SINs down to 317. You may find that there was some issues there, and then you've got that contractors under the SINs may be able to review and quote because of the crosswalk. It says there in the answer, and opportunities post will be automatically crosswalked. So you should review the solicitations as part of the evaluation process. Let me see here. Training and resources, monthly training, just like /events, and then CLPs will be issued. Here's the desk reference, great guide. You can order hard copies at GSA.gov/CMLS. You can actually download it from that link there. If you want a PDF copy, you can download it from that link. So you can have these charts and you'll have the links available. And then here's some web resources. The Interact group is, you see the link there, second sub-bullet. Link over to Interact and join that group. And then the GSA.gov/schedules and mass category requirements are probably going to be the two places that you'll want to go reference what we've talked about today. And I believe that's it. So we can take some questions if you have any at this point. Dave, I'll turn it over to you. If we have a question, David, I will just read it and answer it, and we'll do it that way.
Sure, Steve. Yeah, they'll pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, and then I'll make them public. Yeah, if you have any questions for Steve, just type them in the bottom of that Q&A box, and then you just hit the enter key or the little call button there, and that will shoot the question over to Steve. So thank you for all that information. I know it was a lot to cover, but a really good, thorough overview, so appreciate that, Steve.
Yes, sir. You're welcome, and thank you. And thank you all for hanging in there with us. I know it was a little bit long. Most of these things last about an hour, but I just wanted to be thorough in this process.
Really? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, technically this class is a 2-hour class. Everyone that signed up in FATAS will get 2 CLPs, so no worries there. Just go into your training history and you'll see your credit there. And just to clarify that. And if you didn't get a copy of today's presentation, it's in the lower left. Feel free to click on that. And I would encourage folks to also download the promo slide for Camp Gateway. We're doing a pretty big promotion at GSA for those classes coming up end of July, beginning of August, because they really do help 1102s do their job, frankly. And it just really makes your job a lot easier. Just gave a presentation on Gateway Advanced the other week, which was very well received. So thanks for your time today. Looking at the question box to see if anything came in.
David, I see one here. And Vicki, thank you for your kind words there. And for phase 3, the COs schedule the order that mods will be requested. Not sure exactly the meaning of that. I'll tell you what the process is going to be is that first of all, the Mass PMO is going to be involved to some degree to make sure that things are going well, and there's going to be some cross-center. At GSA, we have 7 acquisition centers managing schedules. There's going to be some cross-center coordination because you may have a company that's got a PSS schedule and an IT schedule, and then they'll combine into one. They're going to have to make a decision on who's going to be the lead contracting officer on that schedule going forward. I mean, who's going to be the contracting officer for the single schedule. They did have 2 contracting officers previously. It's largely going to be based on preponderance of work. It's going to be a conversation with the contractor on, maybe they're using Schedule 70 more and they want to stay with their Schedule 70 contracting officer. Maybe they use engineering more and they want to go with the engineering contracting officer out in Auburn, Washington. And so those conversations are going to take place on which acquisition center is going to manage that schedule because, again, you're combining the work of 2 acquisition centers in this scenario. In terms of the order that mods will be processed, that's going to generally be, first come, first serve. It's going to be the contracting officer working their workload as normal and looking at when those modifications were put into the system and just working through the process as normal. I will tell you that we do sometimes at GSA at the request of a buyer, not at the request of the contractor, but if a federal agency who is buying using the contract, they have a need for the contract sooner rather than later, we will consider expediting that. So if you have a customer that's using the contract, and by the way, if you're moving over the modification or moving over the labor categories from the old contract to the new contract through a modification process, the old contract's going to stay in place until that modification is done. So there's going to really be no break in business capability here. So you can always use the old schedule if needed. If there's a pending requirement, you need to let the contracting officer at GSA know maybe that can be taken, that can be looked at to see if we want to expedite that to get it done so that we can close out that old schedule so that it doesn't have that order out there that was just issued, where maybe if we work through the process, it could have been issued against the single schedule that's going to remain in place. So a lot of dynamics going on there, Vicki, and I'm not sure what your role from whether you're GSA or buyer or what here, but there's a lot of dynamics there. Talk to the GSA contracting officer, send emails to the Mass PMO. The Mass PMO has done an outstanding job so far, and I'm confident that will continue through this process into phase 3. The main thing we want to do is make sure that there's no break in business capability. So we want the government to be able to continue to place orders, and we want contractors to be able to continue to sell their offerings. So we're going to work really hard to make sure that happens.
And Steve, that address is maspmo@gsa.gov, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just whoops. I thought I just posted it. Hold on one second. Now I just posted it. So it's right there in the Q&A box, folks, maspmo@gsa.gov if you have further questions.